So, interesting little tidbits from the history of ragtime. Here's a story, and I'm going to leave it up to you to decide whether you think this is a true story or not. It takes place in New York in the early 1900s, and it has to do with two of America's greatest music writers, Scott Joplin and Irving Berlin. Both of them were living in New York at this time. Joplin was busy on his final project, one that was very close to his heart, writing an opera that would use ragtime music, and this opera was called Treemonisha. The story goes that he was going around New York to various music publishers trying to find someone who would be interested in publishing this opera. Now, even though Joplin was tremendously successful writing ragtime, a lot of publishers were very skeptical about the commercial value of a ragtime opera. So he was having a hard time getting it published. And eventually he comes to Irving Berlin. Now, Berlin had started off as a singing waiter, and he had worked his way up through the musical ladder by writing hit after hit after hit to the place where he had enough money and influence to start his own publishing business. So Joplin comes to him as a music publisher and says, here's these scores from my opera, Treemonisha. I think you should publish them. And he leaves the music with Berlin. And he comes back a little bit later, a few days later, and Berlin says, I'm not interested. I don't think there's good commercial possibilities here. So Joplin takes the scores and goes home. But then, to Joplin's horror, not much later, Berlin comes out with a new song called Alexander's Ragtime Band. And this song is a tremendous hit. And Joplin says, he stole my melody. He claimed that Berlin had taken a melody from the end of his opera, a piece, the big finale of the opera, which is a piece called A Real Slow Drag, taken the melody and used it to create Alexander's Ragtime Band. And Joplin apparently was very upset. The story goes that he was in tears about this, but he went back and rewrote A Real Slow Drag to make it less like Alexander's Ragtime Band. Okay, that's the story. Now, is it true? Hard to say. It's interesting that the story exists in several different forms from different sources, and in some of them, the publisher is not named, and the song that supposedly was taken from A Real Slow Drag is not named. But certainly over time, the story coalesced around this idea that it was Berlin who had stolen the piece and used it to create Alexander's Ragtime Band. So what really happened, though? Why would Irving Berlin, who was a musical genius, tremendously prolific composer, steal a melody from somebody else? Well, I personally suspect that if he did, it was unconscious. And I can tell you as a composer that I have had this happen to me. I've been working on a piece of music, I've written a piece of music, and suddenly I go, oh my gosh, this is this other piece, right? I've kind of transformed it a little bit in my brain, but I'm just really copying a piece I've already heard. The ability to distinguish that from an idea that I came up with all on my own is really hard. And I could see Berlin, who probably heard dozens of songs every week as a publisher, having this melody come up in his brain, not realizing that it's something he got from Joplin's opera, and going ahead and writing this piece. It's interesting that eventually folks came to Berlin and asked him about this, like, hey, there's this rumor out there that you got this melody from a black composer, and just paid him like $10 or something for it. And Berlin's response is really interesting. He says, first of all, if you're going to say that I got the melody for Alexander's Ragtime Band from this black composer, who did I get the melodies from for all my other hits? Right? Making the point that he was writing hit after hit. He didn't need to take somebody else's work. And then he says, and if there is a black composer out there who's got another hit in him like Alexander's Ragtime Band, bring him to me. I'll get that hit out of him and I'll pay him $20,000. So, we don't know Joplin's side of the story. We don't have anything from him directly on this subject. His family members and other people he was associated with are the ones who told the story and said that, yes, it was Berlin. Yes, it was Alexander's Ragtime Band. Okay, so the proof of the pudding would be to see if you see the relationship between Alexander's Ragtime Band and A Real Slow Drag.
All right, so here we go. Most people will recognize the chorus of Alexander's Ragtime Band. It goes like this. Very, very famous. You may not be familiar with the verse which precedes that chorus because it's not performed as often. But here's how the verse goes. Now listen to the current version, the version that has come down to us, of A Real Slow Drag. And this is not the beginning of the piece, it's sort of the big marching finale. Is very different. Joplin's piece, being a slow drag, is slow and lyrical and very emotional, deep feeling to it. Berlin's is very sprightly and fun and an upbeat kind of a piece. But if you listen to those melodies, here's the verse of Alexander's Ragtime Band. Here's Real Slow Drag. Similar. And particularly when we take into account the fact that apparently Joplin went back and rewrote a slow drag to make it less like Alexander's Ragtime Band, I think there's a very good chance that the original version of this melody was something like... which would be even closer. So, I leave it up to you. Did Irving Berlin steal a melody from Scott Joplin?
Okay, by the way, my source for this is a book called King of Ragtime, Scott Joplin and His Era by Edward Berlin, which is a really interesting book. I totally recommend it. And you decide.